Hello and welcome to the NewsX Sunday Guardian Roundtable. Today we're debating a rather serious issue, the politics of hate which seems to be engulfing our country. Of course, I'm talking about the gruesome beheading in Udaipur, but also events that have led up to it. We've had statements, we've had counter statements, we've seen this whole whipping up of passions on both sides. And of course, religion plays a huge role. We've had Hindus versus Muslims before, but the rhetoric suddenly seems sharper, more polarized. We've had bureaucrats, civil servants, judges raising this issue, writing to the prime minister. We've had politicians on both sides. We've had people making irresponsible statements. I'm talking about Nupur Sharma, which is actually what was being told was behind the recent the beheading of therefore a reaction to that. But having said all this, the BJP is still winning in Muslim strongholds. We saw the recent win in Azamgarh and Rampur also. So is it fair to just blame BJP leaders or the fringe elements for whipping up passions? Should we just trace it back a step back a bit and see what led to all this, the Congress politics of appeasement? To figure out what is happening, to put a finger on the pulse of the politics of hate, I have joining me Suhail Seth, commentator. He's a marketing maven, but also a political columnist. Kaveri Bamzai, former editor of India Today, and also she's a columnist and an author. Dr. Sanjay Baru, he was a media advisor in the Manmohan Singh government and an author and commentator columnist. Suhail, how do you, see what is happening today? Definitely we're living in what we would call not very healthy times. There's passion on both sides. It's an intolerant India that we are showcasing to the rest of the world.
Actually, it's not an intolerant India. It's the real India, which the surface of has been scratched for everyone to see. I think the point that you made earlier is interesting. No majority in any country must be made to feel guilty that they're the majority. Neither must a minority be made to feel that they're worthy of persecution because they're a minority. If you trace back, the problems between Hindus and Muslims essentially of this nature, of such deep, grievous nature, began around the middle of 1930s. When you saw the advent and the greater advent of the Indian Muslim League, the IUML or the Indian Muslim League. After that, we saw repeatedly the politics of appeasement that you alluded to. You then had a situation where under Rajiv Gandhi's, when in Rajiv Gandhi's time, there was an act to ban Muslim personal law. It was brought back through parliament and the whole Shah Bano case turned on its head. Where are we today? Look, the tragedy is the statistics speak differently from the democratic values that we keep talking about and that are enshrined in our constitution. We are a Hindu state only for the reason of majoritarianism, but we are actually a secular country. The difference is, and there'll be no one better than Sanjay Baru to talk about this later, the difference is how do you create a distinction between the state and the nation, or the state and the country? One is governed through emotion, the other is governed through the constitution. You made the point about Azamgarh, you made the point about BJP winning. Winning sometimes is also at the altar of fear. It is not only at the altar of affection. I see not an intolerant India, I see an India at an inflection point. I see an India coming to terms with the realities of having to coexist. There will be pain. There will be greater pain. My worry is not that. My worry is something different. My worry is when institutions become inflamed, when institutions become partisan, when institutions begin to take sides of either the majority or the minority, throwing law to the winds, throwing good judgment to wind. And as Amartya Sen says, ultimately justice is about fairness. And if fairness is sacrificed, then we are in trouble. So my worry is not that it is sad, but Priya, it's sad because some of us are participants on those television programs. I have seen how passions have been inflamed. I've seen how people make irresponsible statements. I've said on your program hundreds of times that the Prime Minister should at times condemn quite unequivocally the statements made by people of his party. Why should he do it? Because he is the Prime Minister. But, that's again work in progress. So I don't think we're living in an intolerant India. We're living in an India at a great influx, at an inflection point, and we're seeing an India that is trying to adjust to the realities of having to coexist. This is To my mind, I mean, you'll hate me for saying this is 1947 2.0. But I have a great belief that this too shall pass.
What's your take on the times we are living in? Are we back to that, the regressive politics of partition, or are we heading towards there? Who do we blame really for it? I guess toxic TV is one, but there are also others to be blamed. Dr. Baru.
For me,
Hmm.
well, first of all, Priya, I mean, I endorse the sentiments of Sohail. But, I think the time is gone when we continue to look at communal politics through the prism of politics or through the prism of elections and who wins and who doesn't win. We are in very dangerous territory. The Hindu-Muslim problem is an inherent problem to the existence of India. You know, for 1,000 years, Hindus and Muslims have lived in this part of the world. And about 75 years ago, we chose to craft a constitution that enabled people from different religions to live as citizens within a democracy. Communal tensions have always been there, will always be there. And India is not an exception to this rule. Every country in the world sees racial tensions, communal tensions. Societies which are multicultural, multi-religious, multi-ethnic, multilinguistic live with internal tensions. So the fact that there are tensions between two religions or between two linguistic groups or between two castes or between two classes, that is not new. And that will always be there, whether you're a democracy or not a democracy. I think what we are now entering is a dangerous territory where there is increasing use of violence in the expression of these animosities. And Sohail's reference to partition 1947 is not placed. There is excessive use of violence in the representation of differences. We have seen this before. We have seen caste conflict resulting in deaths. I mean, we have seen upper caste killing lower caste. People have forgotten. Karamchedu, Tamil Nadu, where the upper caste slaughtered Dalits, right? We have seen the slaughtering of tribals. We have seen slaughtering of Hindus and Muslims. But I think we are now entering a territory in which the state, unlike in the past, where the state, in fact, intervened in order to stop these tensions or stop these violence, is in fact sitting, to put it in a gentle way, sitting on the sidelines and watching. Some may say it is actually actively engaged in promoting. Let me end with one fact. Every time there was a terrorist incident or a communal conflagration during the 5 years that I was with Manmohan Singh in 2004 to 2009, every single time, and this is on record, you can go and check in your libraries, the Prime Minister would come on television and ask people to calm down. The standard instruction was, whenever there is a terrorist incident, whenever there is some communal violence, the job of the government is to calm it down, because you cannot erase it. These problems exist. But an elected government's job is to step in and ask people of different communities, different groups that are engaged in some kind of a conflict to calm down. And it's the responsibility of the state to ensure that peace is restored. The reason I say we are entering a dangerous territory is that the state is not playing that role. It is civil society that is playing that role. And of course, part of the media is playing the positive role. Part of the media is engaged in fanning the flames. Now, of course, there will be different elements, political parties, vested interests, media. There are a lot of people engaged in fanning the flames, and there will be people engaged in trying to douse the flames. But the state has to step in and take action against those who are responsible for fanning the flames. We have not seen that happen. We have seen it happen in an arbitrary way. I mean, the arrest of Zubair, for example, is a very arbitrary action. The non-arrest of Nupur Sharma, arbitrary action. I mean, some people get arrested, some people don't get arrested. These are all situations that raise questions. But I am seriously concerned. I want to stop looking at this whole Hindu-Muslim issue from an electoral point of view, either of majority politics, minority appeasement. I think that stage of playing this numbers game is over. We are talking about the stability of the country.
Come in. Is it what is it? Is it if not for electoral, is it a politics of distraction to take away from real issues? I mean, we have elements on both sides. It's not just one side that are going unchecked.
Yeah, one point that I want to make is, Fareed Zakaria once said this about the American state. He said the American state is far more progressive than American society. And for a long time, I believe that the Indian society was far more progressive than the Indian state. I feel what has happened now is that the Indian state as well as Indian society are at a point where they're mirroring each other. And I think that is what is really the key here for me. I feel we have banished love, kindness, compassion from public life, from social life, from our cultural life. Tell me one romantic song that you remember recently, one romantic movie you remember recently. Love has become a sort of bad word, it's a kind of weakness. Everything that you see around is angry, inflamed. Hanuman, who used to be, the most benevolent of our gods. You see those angry Hanuman posters. And these are not small things. You think that, okay, it's just the back of a car. No, these are actually cultural symbols, and they're actually telling you what people are thinking. Why do people put up the angry Hanuman sticker on the back of their cars? Why is the whole musculature of Ram becomes so martial? I mean, you see the earlier versions of Lord Ram, and he was a most peaceful and again a most benign of our gods, So I think this whole idea of grafting this muscular kind of Hindutva on this nation has resulted in this kind of strange schizophrenia, if you will, a kind of strange discomfort. And I think that is what is what you see now playing out. I feel it is this complete, we've really carried out a jihad, I'm sorry, against love, with our anti-Romeo squads, with our love jihad, all the talk is about hating love. I mean, the only apostle of love and peace you have currently is maybe the Dalai Lama. And unfortunately, who listens to him? Every time even Rahul Gandhi, for whatever it's worth, would talk about love and compassion, he would be laughed out of the room by everyone, including journalists. So I think the whole idea that love is somehow a kind of weakness, compassion is a kind of weakness, that you need to be constantly alert, constantly in a state of war, constantly in a state of panic and fear, which is of course aggravated by social media. WhatsApp, as we all know, functions on the idea of fear and panic. It spreads it, it feeds it. And I think that, to me, is the biggest issue currently, that as a society, we're feeding off hate. And that is what you see playing out in the most virulent ways possible. And this whole idea that we're a non-violent nation, we are not. We have never been. I mean, I think throughout our history, you've seen it's not just the Mughals who've indulged in fratricide, etc., to gain power. We've had a history of violence throughout, throughout our long civilization as well. So I think that really is what is happening. That, for me.
I know Sahel wants to come in, but I'm going to take a break and then we're going to come back and hear what Sahel has to say. And also we're going to keep the conversation going. So stay with us. Hello and welcome back to the NewsX Sunday Guardian Roundtable. We are here discussing the very toxic politics of hate that is playing all over around us. But Sohail, I know you wanted to come in, and I also have a question for you. We can't blame, you see a procession of Ram Navami that is, interrupted. Then in response to that, bulldozers are brought out. So it's both sides are just heckled up. Sohail.
Because we have allowed, as Kavri also mentioned, we have allowed religion to come into public life. Religion is and was meant to be private. But today, religion has become our identity. It is no longer our scholarship. It is no longer our values. It's no longer compassion or empathy. And that, by the way, is happening across the world in most countries. You think it isn't happening in America? It is. It's happening in Brazil. It's happening in the United Kingdom. It's happening everywhere. What is the solution? I'm a great believer that we know what the problem is. What's the solution? The solution is the state has to be totally blind, like justice. It has to have no tolerance. So, where you want to be intolerant, the state must be intolerant of any form of violence. Number one. Number two, the media cannot say Muslim killed Hindu, because these people must not be allowed to wear their religion when they're committing a crime. A crime is a crime, period. To then give it the garb of religion is further fanning the flames. Number three, we need swifter and demonstrable justice. Sanjay said about one person being arrested, the other person not being arrested. You cannot even seem to be biased. It's the whole Caesar's wife needs to be above suspicion. Number four, no matter what you say, and me, I hate all political parties. But even when Narendra Modi gets exonerated after the recent Supreme Court, decision, you again have people fanning the flames. You again have people abusing. I mean, for God's sake, you're also pushing the man right at the top into a corner. I mean, he's been exonerated several times, and you keep pushing it back, saying, "No, you're a communalist. You engineered the riots, so you kept quiet." Blah blah blah. We need to stop. And here, Sanjay said civil society is the conscience, but civil society is equally divided. I can tell you a zillion people within civil society who have hidden agendas and who are actually funded for their agenda-filled or hate-filled agendas. That's not the issue. The issue is we need to calm the hell down. We need to have demonstrable punishment and ostracization for people who indulge in this. And social platforms, including media platforms, need to be more responsible. You cannot have a country which feeds off the audiovisual medium every evening being pushed into the cauldron of hate rather than the cauldron of love. I mean, this is not the way you're going to develop. And my last point, and this is what I worry the most about, your children are getting affected. Your children are getting impacted. School teachers have begun to take sides. I was born and raised in Calcutta. We never imagined, we never even asked whether, a person was Muslim or Hindu or Christian or Parsi. It never came into our zehen. Today, it is being taught from day one. That is pernicious, because that hits at the idea of India. And there is only one idea of India, which is its uniqueness in its diversity and its plurality. The day you hit at that, you destroy India.
Dr. Varu, Sanjay, also, the fact is that what Sahgal said in his earlier statement, that, it's not something new, or you said it, that the cauldron was always there, but now because we have easy accessible platforms to express it, social media, WhatsApp, television studios, that it's all come to the surface. This is always there hidden. So is it not fair, yes, Modi should intervene and say something, but is it also something that's, one can't just blame the BJP for it. It's something that was always there.
Absolutely.
So look, sorry. I'm talking of the state. Currently, the BJP happens to be in power in the government of India and therefore is in charge of the Indian state, right? As I said, the problem of Hindu-Muslim or Hindu-Sikh or Sikh-Muslim or Christian, these are all problems that many multi-religious societies have, and we certainly have, and in some ways have been aggravated by political events over the last century. That's not the issue. The challenge exists. And there are multiple challenges. This is only one of the challenges that the state has to deal with. But there are multiple challenges. I talked about caste. We don't think much about that, but there is caste violence as there is communal violence, right? But the state has to intervene on behalf of the citizen, uphold law and order. That's a responsibility of the state. The state cannot be partisan. What we now have is a partisan state. And I think that is the change which worries me. That, like Sahgal said about the US, I mean, when you have the Supreme Court of the United States taking a position on abortion based on Christian faith, not based on any concept of, individual liberty, etc., but based on Christian faith, where religion becomes the framework within which a law is interpreted. And today, when you have religion becoming the framework within which the state is functioning, the police force is functioning, the judiciary begins to function. That is a dangerous step forward. And I think that is what worries me, that the state at the end of the day has to come in as a neutral entity between warring citizens or warring groups of citizens. And merely to say, oh, the majority is in power and therefore naturally the majority will run the show. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
That doesn't work. And secondly, what is the concept of majority? Merely having a majority in Lok Sabha doesn't make you the majority. Still, the 50% of the population is not voting for you. So you are not the majority, right? So my simple point
elections and you're in power. So in that,
my simple point is that the Indian state has to remain a secular state when it comes to the rights of individuals. Whatever your religion be at home, whatever your practices be at home, do not bring that into the sphere of the functioning of the state.
Keep your religion at home is easier said than done, Kaveri, isn't it? In today's, in India,
Yeah, I think what Suhail said at the outset, and what Dr. Baru is saying as well. I feel that the point about we being at 1947 2.0. I think we're at a stage where there's a tremendous churn taking place. It's a sort of generational trauma which skipped a generation. The generation that really suffered partition didn't really address it because I think they were so busy just getting on with their lives. I think it's that sentiment, it's those emotions which are now coming to the surface. Could you ever imagine Godse being venerated as much as Gandhi? Yeah. Could you ever imagine Savarkar being studied with as much depth as Nehru, or the kind of diminishing of Nehru that you see in the public space? And even the Congress party doesn't want to claim Nehru. I mean, it's a tragedy of Indian politics that a great leader like Nehru is not wanting to be claimed by the party that he led for so long. So I think this whole churn that is taking place between the communities is a kind of a leftover of something that was not addressed when we set up our nation, when we set up the republic. I think the leaders at that point were so busy with the idea of getting on with life, and these were certain values that they gave us. This generation is saying, why do we have to accept that? Why do we have to accept those icons? Why do we have to accept these labels? Why do we have to be called a secular nation? We don't want to be called a secular nation. We're very happy to be called a Hindutva nation. I mean, there is that generational sort of churning that's taking place, and what will emerge from this, I think, is what is interesting, and that is something that I would like to watch, and I hope and pray, because I really always do believe in the hugely progressive nation that we are, society that we are, that we will sort of correct ourselves, but who knows. But I think that is that leftover trauma, the leftover churning that wasn't quite addressed. It was all there was a superficial calm and a superficial peace and a superficial sort of a functioning democracy that was laid on the fires of what is possibly the worst communal division one could ever have thought. I mean, partition was a bloodbath. We never really addressed that. I think that is the key again for me.
But now's the time for some serious introspection. Are we heading towards that bloodbath again? The churn that is happening, what is happening on our streets, what is happening on our WhatsApp groups, and on Twitter, and on our own television channels that beam straight into our drawing rooms. That is something that really needs to be, this toxic debates that are happening, the toxic atmosphere. Something needs to be done. And of course, I agree, the person who's head of the country needs to step in. We need to hear from the leaders themselves. But from now, that's it. Thank you so much for this conversation, and thank you all for watching this.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.